The video today is all about trust. We need to redefine it. For many, trust is kind of a confusing or loaded word. Maybe some of you are like, I'm not really sure what trust is. I'm not sure how that's defined or what that means. And for others, you may say, oh, I know a lot about trust. I've had a lot of wounding and hurt in my past from relationships where I trusted someone and they didn't prove to be trustworthy. In either case, I want to kind of go through today in this particular lesson on redefining trust and seeing how that has played a role in your marriage and maybe some of the problems you've been struggling with. So the first thing I want to do is to let you know in the second principle that trust is something earned, not freely given away. If you look at the definition of trust, trust is relying on the strength, integrity, or ability of another person. You got to pay attention to the fact that the emphasis is on relying on someone else, on someone else's integrity, strength, or ability. So the idea here is trust is something that is a reactionary response. And some of you may misunderstand trust and say, well, if I don't trust someone, that must be an issue in myself. I'm just not a trusting person. No, the right response is to say, well, maybe I don't trust you because you haven't proven to be trustworthy. Perhaps I've relied on you in the past for things and you didn't follow through. So it's important to realize that trust is something that you have to earn. So look at that in your own marriage. There's some good questions here that you're going to read through in your lesson today that you can ask one another to see if trust is an issue. And trust doesn't just have to be about, are you going to cheat on me? It could be the small things of life, of how are you spending our money? If I give you honest feelings and I confess things to you, are you judgmental or do you listen to me? Trust runs the gamut in a marital relationship. And the idea here is to recognize that trust is something that you both need to be earning from one another, that both of you react to what you see. So here's a couple of important things to keep in mind as you're talking about trust. First is trust is measurable, which means if you find that you're not trusting your spouse in an area, then talk about that and give some examples of things they could do to earn your trust. That if you saw them doing this or saying this, you would be more apt to say you're trustworthy. Second, that trust takes time to build. It doesn't happen overnight. You got to look at it like a bank account. That the more things you do and say to be consistent, to show that you're reliable to your spouse, that you want to earn their trust, that you build up that account, that over time you should trust your spouse more than you did in the beginning of your relationship. Now, important to note too, that within trust, we also want to make sure that we pay attention to trust is different than forgiveness. And I think that's an important thing I want to take a second to highlight. Trust, we have learned, is a reactionary response, that as you see your spouse being reliable and trustworthy, you trust them more. You give them your trust. But forgiveness is different in nature. Forgiveness is something that's more proactive in response. Forgiveness is a choice that you make to give. It's like a gift. When we give a gift to someone, it's not because they asked us for a gift. It's because we wanted to give it. So it's important for you to realize that in your marriage, that there's a difference between forgiving your spouse for something that they may have failed in, but not trusting them yet because they haven't proven themselves over time. So I want you to make sure that you look at that differently and see that forgiveness is different than trust. So go through these discussion questions, read through this information on trust today, and join me for the last video on conflict.